Zoom it is.
No kidding. I know. I'm in the same boat. Hopefully that'll start changing as we go into spring and summer. Things start slowing down.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Doing great. Doing great over here. Yesterday was fun watching the game. Having no skin in the game made it even more enjoyable. Although my mother rediscovered her Cincinnati roots and became a lifelong Bengals fan for the first time in 40 years at about, a week ago. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. Yeah, just working and riding my bike as much as possible, and that's about it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's see here. There's the three of us. OB is on. Tony, Rick. Let me just make sure I can hear you guys, and then I'll go ahead and call to order. All right. Hopefully Tony and Rick.
Sorry about that.
Perfect. All right. And Rick, I'm hoping you can hear us. With five of us alert and present, I'm going to call to order at 4:30 this meeting of the Grand County Planning Commission. It's February 14th. There's Rick. And we're waiting on Josie, but we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so first things first. Let me just pull up my packet here. Excuse me. Okay, so calling to order. Do we have any citizens to be heard? We have two public hearings on the agenda today. So these will be an opportunity to speak on an issue that is not a public hearing on our agenda or an issue that is not on our agenda. So if you're here to make a comment as a citizen, if you could come off mute or put a comment in chat. Otherwise, you'll have an opportunity to speak during our public hearings. All right. Seeing none, I will move us on in the agenda to ex parte communications and disclosures. And again, we do have two public hearings. So if anyone has anything to disclose or any ex parte conversations to share, now is the time to do so. Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on to approval of our meeting minutes from January 24th. Does anyone have any comments or edits they would like to suggest? Otherwise, I'll accept a motion to adopt.
I motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting. Sorry.
Hey, is there a second?
Great.
Second.
Seconded by OB. So a motion to approve the minutes from January 24th, seconded by OB. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Raise your hand, say aye. And any opposed? And any abstaining? Steve is abstaining. So that is 5. Oh, I can't hear you.
I'm just abstaining since I wasn't there. I reviewed some of the more important elements of it though. So I got mostly caught.
Sounds good. Okay, so 5 in favor, 1 abstention. So that approval goes through, and we will move on to Trish with the County Commission update.
Okay, hopefully, can you hear me now?
Yes, all good.
Okay, good. I was like, okay. All right, so let me, I just kind of, quite a few quick things. In the last commission meeting, which was on February 1st, one of the things we did was discuss the Thompson Springs Special Service District and possibly acquiring the UMTRA line. So there is I think it's 22-mile line from the Green River out to UMTRA, used to water down the pile as it's being moved. And their goal is to acquire that line once UMTRA is done utilizing it and being able to use that water source. So it was kind of a lively discussion and talking about just producing a letter of support for that so that they can move forward with not only acquiring that, but possible funding sources. This was, I don't know why I'm throwing this out. I just thought it was somewhat annoying. We talked about tax abatement, and one of the big companies that failed to pay their taxes for some time was a wastewater treatment plant out in Harley Dome, and they owed the county about $250,000, $258 to be exact. They went bankrupt, and it was really weird because an interim property owner bought the property, and then they didn't have to pay the back taxes, whether it was Grand County's failure or anyway. So that was kind of a bummer to have to write that one off. So basically gas and oil. Wastewater is, and Tony probably has a better description for this, but it's produced when you're extracting oil and gas resources. And so there's a big wastewater treatment plant out there. Do you have anything to add to that, Tony? You probably know more about that than myself.
I don't know any specifics about this wastewater treatment plant. This is the first I've heard of it. So I'll probably speculate the variety of the kinds and techniques of wastewater is quite broad.
Right, right.
But I'd be happy to look into it and get back to you if you guys want someone to do research.
Yeah, I throw that out because it's just a strange correlation, because that new Bookcliffs Highway in theory would go right by that treatment plant. So that's strange. But anyways, just throwing that out. We placed another moratorium on Thompson Springs water tap. So that other one had just lapsed. And so we're continuing that until they're able to develop more water sources. The Title V, the reworking of the business licenses, we tabled that. There was there's quite a bit of discussion going on, and we've got quite a bit of backlash from the Chamber of Commerce and business owners. And so we're just kind of in this process. Chrissy is just slowly reworking some of that and trying to make sure that she incorporates their input. But we just tabled it. And I don't think it'll actually go anywhere in the next commission meeting either, to be honest. So.
And Trish, just because I know this has been a topic that the Planning Commission has looked at, and we considered bringing this in front of the Planning Commission and ultimately didn't. Would you mind just taking half a second to explain the updates that are being proposed and the timeline?
There's quite a few. I think we talked about this idea that, well, there's a whole bunch of things surrounding taxation of those businesses, OHV businesses, and that they're not paying the appropriate taxes into the appropriate funds. Chris would really have to kind of explain that, but there's quite a few issues with that. So really parsing that out. Chrissy's been working with the tax commission at a statewide level to make sure that she makes the business owners understand, like they're charging the proper amount. It's just not being parsed out into the proper appropriations. There was more discussion as to identification of the vehicles, right? So the whip flags, there's a lot of backlash on the whip flags, making sure that identification is on both sides of the vehicle. So right now, I believe it was just the driver's side. So there's just quite a few little things that we were trying to clean up.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think we're always, nothing's coming to the table tomorrow now that I think about it. It's not on the agenda. So I don't think Christina's just been swamped, and she, so being able to, visit with the chamber and get some constructive criticism, constructive feedback is important. Like right now, a lot of the feedback that we're getting is, it's just anger and not really constructive. And so hopefully we can get some constructive feedback as to, what's workable and what's not.
So the original updates to Title V as proposed would require the decibel testing in January of this year. Now it's being moved back. What other timeline effect does this have, or could this have, to the extent that you know, on the other regulations included in the Title V update, like signage? I'm thinking just before the season starts in full bore, like, do we anticipate any risk to the residents' ability to identify people who are not, following the rules?
I don't know. I don't think I can answer that question, but I can definitely, and I know that was, the few business owners I talked to, they're struggling anyways. Yeah. The time frame, they're struggling with that, anyways. It was this weird, like, honestly, a lot of the stuff we passed in April, they had not really ingested, if that makes sense. So they feel like a lot of stuff was sprung on them. So maybe we did a poor job in really making sure that information got out to those companies. I'll just state that, trying to, you know what I mean?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for the update.
Okay, you bet. Let's see. We kind of reworked an ordinance regarding surplus property. The county is entertaining some idea of possibly selling off some surplus property. And we're going right into the idea of affordable housing. You know, it's properties that are actually located in San Juan County. And so can we repurpose that money in our own county and possibly try to provide more affordable housing? I mean, that's just a really rough idea what we're throwing out, but we have some fairly large parcels of property right across the county line. And so it's just sitting there, right? So just ideas. We wrote a letter to San Juan County. I think we talked a little bit about Mill Creek, but we wrote a fairly elaborate letter. Sarah Stock put that together regarding that Mill Creek campground, the fire danger that it would impose, the human waste, the gray water, the issues to our aquifer and surface water, and also the idea about zoning. That's zoned agricultural, right? And so they want to put 100-person campground up Mill Creek. And so we will see where that goes. We also wrote a letter, you will be happy to hear, regarding the Sky Ranch proposal and the threat that airport would cause to, and also the disturbances would cause to our residents, in opposition of the Sky Ranch Airport. And then there was a fairly extensive public hearing on the Entrada proposal. And it was interesting because the commission was really bantering with the developer. So that was interesting. Not a lot of people called in, but there was quite a bit of discussion with the developer. And then, as you know, so that was the meeting on the 1st, and on the 8th, we had a joint meeting with the city and San Juan County. And the goal is to just propose a joint resolution where we would begin to have a working group between those three entities, talking about everything from water, dark skies, air quality, traffic, housing, job market. And each entity would have 3 members on that working group. We were able to pass our portion of it. San Juan County, Willie Gray Eyes, I don't know where he was, but you couldn't hear him at all. So he couldn't vote. And so they're supposed to do it at their next commission meeting. And then the council was supposed to do it at their next council meeting. So that's about it for me.
Wonderful. Any other questions for Trish? I think I'll raise this during future considerations if you're able to stay, Trish, but I would love to hear a little bit more about sort of upcoming county commission priorities and what it could mean for priorities directed back to planning and zoning and how we could maybe get some clarity there, which I know there's a proposed for that to come up at the 22nd meeting, but
right.
Teeing up, I'd love to talk to that. And if you have to drop early, maybe that's something we can.
No, that's okay. I noticed your agenda, and I think that what you guys have on there is really kind of our priorities too. So that looks really good.
Cool. Great. All right. So we will move on to staff updates. As part of this, we have an update for the Spanish Valley survey results. And Laura, maybe you can give us kind of like a TLDR one pager before we go into any of the specific details. Land use code updates that Elisa will take us through, and then we'll talk through the scenario planning for the workshop tomorrow. So Laura, the floor is yours.
Sweet. Yes. Hi, everybody. I was definitely just going to give a little TLDR because most of the results are agenda packet. So you all go through those, but I just wanted to share that as of today, we had 3 survey responses, which is great. I think it ended up going to about 1,800 mailboxes or something like that. And that did include likely, second home property owners, that kind of thing. So, there was a wide range, but it seems like most folks who did complete the survey are full-time residents, but got owners in there as well.
Laura, I'm so sorry am I the only person for who Laura is breaking up a little bit?
No, I'm trying to take notes.
Sorry, I'll turn my video off.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. If you could actually back up to the point where you were discussing how many survey results. That's about when we.
Oh yeah. So as of today, the 82. So that's pretty good. We ended up
So,
sending,
Laura,
is it
I'm
still
so
bad?
sorry. You're breaking up still a little bit. Would you mind maybe calling in on your cell phone, just seeing if we can attach the audio that way? Because
Yes.
I definitely want to make sure that we hear the updates here.
Yes, you can, well, yeah, 1 second.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip you and Elisa and ask Elisa to take us through the land use code updates, and then we'll come back to the survey after you've had a chance to call in on your phone.
Perfect.
If that's all right.
Sorry about that.
No, you're all good. It's
Trying.
part of the game.
Colin.
Thank you. So Lisa, if you would take us through the land use code updates that you've been driving.
Yeah. Okay, great. This is just a kind of a real quick status update. I don't know why my video is not working. Sorry for that. The land use code updates that I've been working on, the language is currently being drafted for just the ones that we've been talking about for a long time. So really narrowed it down to Article 3, Article 4, and Article 6 right now. And there's a few different topic areas under each of those. But we are definitely focusing on housing options, solutions for that, maybe temporary, like kind of an emergency workforce housing solution. So that's something I'm still trying to get consensus on what that would look like between the, your body and the county commission. And then like Christina and Chris Baird have also weighed in on some of the ideas that have been put out there. So I'm going to bring that topic up specifically at the February 26th, the February 22nd Land Use Steering Committee meeting, which includes some of you from the Planning Commission and then as well some county commissioners. So Christina is also invited to that meeting, and I think she's planning on attending. So hopefully we can have more direction on what kind of a affordable housing or seasonal workforce housing solution we want to start going with. And then I can develop the language for the code update on that. But then to give you just a brief overview of the revised timeline. So the 22nd is that steering committee meeting. So I'll be bringing all the draft language that I have currently at that time to have those folks review and provide feedback on. And then February 28th, I'm hoping to bring more finalized language at the Planning Commission for discussion. And then March 1st, that very next day, also bring the same language and draft language to the County Commission. Between March 1st and the middle of the month, I'm hoping we can make a lot of progress on revisions based on the feedback that I'm getting from both bodies and then also with legal review. And it might be ambitious, but we can shoot for March 14th to 15th to present final drafts of all of these updates to the Planning Commission and the County Commission. So if you have any initial feedback or questions at this point, I'm not going to go too much into the actual land use code updates because I've kind of done that a lot in the past, and we're going to be discussing them in more detail at that steering committee meeting.
Great. Any questions for Elisa? Exciting to see this move forward. So thank you for the update. And Laura, are you able to join us now?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
right
much better. Thank you so much for calling in.
Okay, great. We'll make this work. Okay. So sorry, maybe you've heard this part a bunch, but so as of today, we have 382 responses, almost 400, which is great. And we sent it to about 1,800 mailboxes or so. And that does include, a lot of the condos and second homeowners and that sort of thing. But it looks like the majority of participants were full-time Spanish Valley residents. I think if it's all right with all of you, we'll probably just keep the survey up, on a rolling basis for now, and just keep compiling all of that data. It's definitely been slowing down, but the last couple of weeks there's been, quite a few surveys done every day, which is great. It's always kind of fun to go on it every day and see how many more we got. Let's see. So basically, in terms of how the data is being given to me through the platform, I was able to get kind of like a crude Excel sheet with data, but Emily, I know you mentioned crosstabs and figured it out, but can't really do it on Excel. They just kind of give you like a PDF. So if there's anything specific that you would want more information on, I'm totally happy to give that to you, just as I kind of keep working on getting all the numbers together.
Yeah, so the two things I'd love to see, one is the PDF here doesn't have the open-ended responses. And I know there were some questions that had the option of adding more information, and then some were just open-ended if we kept in the question about neighborhoods, for example. So I don't know if it's possible to export those and maybe email that around, just so we can kind of understand some of the qualitative information. And then on the crosstab side, I mean, the big thing that I'm really curious to know is how does residency in general, but also with regard to some of the specific areas, affect the way that people respond to some of these questions? Because I think that will give us a better sense of, so that's one crosstab that I'm particularly interested in. And I'm also just keen to see, I mean, based off of the kind of high level trends and the results, they're very similar to what we might have anticipated and what we saw with the small area plan, but just curious to see if there's anything surprising, people who want to see less development, but more of certain types of development versus just sort of the question by question responses, and more just to, inform our planning.
Totally. And I think that'll be really interesting. And I'm hoping to get that together shortly, specifically like residency and all those. And I guess I'll just point out a couple of key findings that I found just looking through. All across the board, folks want more housing options. I did find it interesting. Most people were not quite on board with finding like a way to legalize living in RVs. Single family housing was something that had pretty adamant support. And just in general, like the rural character and feel was a pretty resounding theme, which is not really surprising, keeping agriculture prominent, but there was a lot of support for, increasing public spaces and parks and the pathway and bike trails and stuff. So that's exciting. And water conservation efforts seem to be really heavily supported as well. So those were just a couple of the things that I wanted to share, but otherwise, I think we'll keep getting some responses filtering in, and I will be happy to share the neighborhoods and the open-ended questions. I'm not sure why those got omitted, but can definitely pass those along. So yeah, I think that's all.
All right. Any other questions or thoughts?
No, just thank you so much for this. I think it's so great to gather this information.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. It's been fun.
I'm going to pencil this question in for after our public hearings during future considerations, but Lisa and John, I'd love to know how and to what extent some of these results align to what we're hearing in the general planning process or anything that was surprising. But we can chat through that a little bit later. So great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. It's just incredible to see the visibility here, and getting almost 400 results is really wonderful. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for all of your guys' help getting all the questions together. So
yes, big shout out to OB for driving that to the finish line and beyond. Thank you both. Great. So last we'll talk about land use study scenarios. Just quick show of hands, who is planning on attending the joint workshop this week? Me, OB, Steve, McHetta's a maybe, Rick will be there. Tony is not. I know I saw your email. Trish is going to be there. And then I don't think Josie is planning to be there. So that gives us 4 to 5 commissioners plus Trish. It'd be wonderful to join forces with the county in this planning process. So John, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair Emily. And good evening, commissioners. Yeah, this is a great survey. We'll be using it in a number of ways, so we can go over that a little bit later. In your agenda package, you should have a timetable. You may not have it though, and I'm just looking at it. So I was trying to share my screen, Jen. Are you able to give me control? Because I can't do it without you. You got your hand on the button.
You should be able to now, John.
Okay, hopefully you can all see that. This has got a bit of the history in it too. As you probably know, we have a fair bit of traction working together with the County Commission, which is great. And we really haven't had a lot of public engagement on the general plan, that is, and the land use strategy. So the goal here is to actually come to terms with a good workshop and a good exercise, which will happen tomorrow. And this exercise has been shared with you already. So you can do that anytime. Doesn't have to be, there's deadline's not tomorrow. You can do that, prepare for that on your leisure, late at night before you go to bed, something like that. And I know you guys work a lot. So the goal is to try to get feedback as much as you can so that we can feed that into the March 3rd session, which is going to be at Star Hall. I think this is later on the agenda as well. So I just wanted to walk through this just to make sure you guys are okay with this timing. I know it's a bit crunched too, and you can think of the land use codes are going on, the economic development master plans going on, and then we got the general plan going on at the same time we're doing the survey. So there's a lot of things that are public related that we have to be careful about. So we believe we'll have a really good outside session at Star Court on March the 3rd. So we want to build towards that. We want momentum as much as we can from both commissions and to some degree stakeholders. We've actually emailed all of the survey or the exercise areas, the general plan and the land use strategies to over 100 stakeholders. So I've not heard anything back though, which is unnerving, but hey. And then we're shooting for adoption. We've kind of lost, you might think commission members that we've lost 4 months because I said we get this done by December. But the land use plan was supposed to be done in June. We're still shooting for that. Transportation plan will be done in June. That's the other thing that's going on right now. And hopefully we'll have the general plan before the commission on April the 5th. So that's kind of where that's at. We're prepared to answer any questions you have to do with the exercise. Emily and Gabe were part of a little bit of a session on Friday with the consultant, and a lot of good questions there, Emily. Thanks for doing that. So we want to engage you as best we can. If you have any questions, get a hold of us in the office. We can come visit you too. We can do house calls. So however that works.
House calls. That's great. So I did ask a whole bunch of questions to make sure that I understood that exercise. And I was glad that I did because there were things about it that I was uncertain about going into tomorrow. John, do you mind if we pull that up just from our packet real quick? And so at tomorrow's workshop, the purpose of this exercise is to be facilitated. So you can fill it out individually. I know the consultant was sharing that he had already gotten some responses, some very thoughtful responses, but he is going to facilitate it tomorrow. But if you're unable to go, or even if you can go, I figured it was good to get a better understanding of what these scenarios, like how to interpret the instructions and think through it. So I might just go ahead and ask John some of the similar questions that I was asking the consultant to make sure that I transfer some of the information. So John, first of all, so we have these 3 scenarios, and one of the questions that I had was how, if we're looking at these potential development plans, are we supposed to look across these 10 things and read them as in a world where one of these is more critical to consider than others due to situations on the ground? Is that when we are saying we think that this type of development maps to other possible development plans? And is there a fourth option not listed where we just should be challenging some of these assumptions? So maybe you could just like put us in the mind frame of how we should be thinking about these.
Yeah, if you look at the concept map that's there on each one of these, there's a little bit of a spider web map. Those are suggested conditions for the scenarios. The idea with scenario planning is not to buttonhole or to pigeonhole, I should say, any particular area, but it is actually pushing buttons in certain ways. So as we go through the workshop and as you start rating what you consider to be important, obviously intuitively we know water is important. We know land is important because we've got very little of it. And we know that development is important, at least managed growth is important, and how that plays into neighborhoods. Those elements may weigh higher for you than they do others. I doubt if they would. To tell you the truth, I think most people would weigh in and say, yeah, water's a big one. And that can trump a lot of things as long as we know what the capacity is. So to answer one of your questions, Emily, I know you asked several there. There's different scenarios. These are three, but the conditions kind of weigh in on how the scenarios will be developed. The rural by design one, then 191 corridor, and the Moab and its fringe are meant to kind of be almost polarized in some ways so that you can see the conditions and how they weigh in on different types of development. But you can mix and match these frameworks, or when you're doing the exercise, take a look at the conditions and just start weighting them. And then a different result could come out. It might be a B1, it might be a C -1, that might be an A plus. So there's different hybrids that can come out of scenario planning. If you've ever done scenario planning before, we'll get into this more deeply as we go ahead. The goal is to think about what is affecting our choices and the ability for us to make choices, because we are somewhat in a democracy where we're kind of straitjacketed in some ways on how many choices we can make in Grand County, especially because of no longer public land and restriction on resources. So thinking in terms of what those restrictions are and how they can be overcome is part of that condition analysis. And it might be short, medium, and long term. Well, in almost every case, it will be those three elements. So some things you can do quickly because you have control. Some things will take a long time, but 20 years goes by pretty fast.
And critically, John, the consultant was sharing another person who had filled this out and had come to the realization that what they thought the future should look like was different from how she actually thought that it would look like as far as the constraints, and then filled this out based off of expectations of what the situation actually will be on the ground, even if it doesn't map to what she would hope that it would be. So it's not visioning of this is what we want the future to look like. It's planning for potential futures that we probably don't have a lot of control over at the planning commission and county commission level when it comes to ownership of state lands, federal lands, issues like climate change and so on. So John, again, if you could just take like half a second to, a little more than that, to explain like the mindset we should be in as we're thinking through this, that even if we have our own projection of what the future should be, that's not necessarily the right framing for this.
Yeah, so this exercise really starts to, I think, kind of ground how you view, you expressed it pretty well, Emily, is that this isn't a wish list. This is coming to terms with reality. So there's always that salt that needs to be in it. And you'll get a gut sense of this as you start going through the conditions, I think, if anyone's done the exercise, or the one person you're talking about actually came to that realization as you start going through the exercise. So I think everyone will do that as they start doing this. And then hopefully in the dialogue, there'll be much more of a dynamic, and some of the lights will go on as to what controls we really have and how those can be managed in different scenarios. So the scenarios we looked at in the RFP were slow growth, medium growth, and faster growth, depending on how the cycles would work. Managing slow growth with private land is very difficult. Because people have entitlements already. Cane Creek, for example, has already got entitlement. You can't turn the clock back without getting sued. And we don't really want that. So those kinds of constraints will dictate, and that's a big growth area, will dictate how services are going to work and where the focus should be. It is complicated, but with the expertise I think we have on both commissions, we'll get a really good product that comes out of this. And it probably won't be one of these three you're looking at. And it might be more conceptual in certain areas. It might be conceptual within the Cane Creek area that are more grounded. It might be higher conceptual areas in the North Corridor and in the San Juan County area, of course, because with the boundary there, there's a lot of restrictions as well. The fringe areas around Moab tend to be a little bit more development ready because the services are there. And we lay this over top of where the services currently are and how we manage them over time. So I'm probably making your question, I'm giving you more questions than you probably asked, Emily. So the goal in the end was to actually take the levels of service for sewer, water, stormwater management, hazardous lands, flooding, steep slopes, and we got a lot of this, ridge views, scenic corridors, and put those together with those dynamics. We kind of have that in the general plan, the current general plan now, but it really needs to be articulated much better. And the goal would be to actually lay that over top and then talk about the pace and how that would work together. Hopefully that helps.
So does anyone else have any, hopefully everyone has had a chance to look at the worksheet. It was sent out a week ago. There's also, John sent another email with the attachment of the deck that the consultant is going to walk us through tomorrow. I hadn't noticed that in the first email, so I asked him to resend it. Has everyone had a chance to see that email, look at the attachments, familiarize themselves with what we'll be walking through? And does anyone have any questions that they want to answer while we have John and staff here on the call?
And I should say, Emily, there's a narrated PowerPoint presentation, which is 250 megs that's attached to, hopefully that came across.
You know what? I'm not sure that it did. I will go back and look. I walked through the presentation, but that's what might have been tripping me up. But I will double check.
Yeah, there's a narrated PowerPoint presentation that Bill does. It's kind of dry. He does a pretty good job of explaining things. It's about 15 minutes long, so it came out of the recommendation from the steering committee that we put something in that's a little bit more lay person oriented. If you can't find it in the attachment, which I did send out, it's in the Google Docs link.
Thank you. Okay, that's good to know. So it might just be me who's the laggard here, but I figured if I had questions, others would as well. So I wanted to just leave some time open for any technical questions, realizing we'll go into the depth of the actual exercise tomorrow in the workshop.
I just wanted to say, in terms of kind of this quote reality thing, I guess and I can never remember the exact figures, but we'll just say we have 20% of the acreage. It doesn't belong to the feds or something. We've got 10,000 people in Grand County. Is that a lot less area than a lot of counties in the east have with 10,000 people? So we're in an interesting situation because we aren't all that dense. Now, if one's thinking, well, we've got to fill up the entire county and we are at an 80% deficit, we're in trouble. So, we probably do have a fair amount of land. And then of course there's the quality of land and how much water there is and how much can be agricultural, but yet we are with what land we have, and we aren't that many people yet. I guess I should have said amen.
Was that a comment? You're looking for a comment, Bob, or no?
I really wasn't looking for a comment. I think, though, we do have to kind of face that reality as we're saying we can't get what we might wish for, though I might wish for the 80% of the land to be exactly where it is. But that's just the reality we live within. It's not all that confining, depending on how much we want to grow. But just a comment.
So if you haven't had a chance to fill it out, don't go ahead and do it tonight. If you're attending the workshop, that will be facilitated tomorrow. Otherwise, familiarize yourself with the documents. But John, I think he said he wanted to take us through it tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Bill? Okay. So like I said, I'm here to ask the silly questions so that everyone else who has them doesn't have to stick their neck out. But if there's any other questions, now's your chance. Otherwise, we'll see most of you tomorrow. Okay. Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you, John. This is really exciting to see move forward. I'm looking forward to the conversation tomorrow. Okay, so we have two public, is that it for staff reports? Anything else, or else are we ready to move forward? Great. So we have two public hearings this evening. And I'll just remind everyone the public hearing rules. So we'll ask staff to give a report. Then we'll offer the applicant to make a statement if they'd like. There's no requirement that they do. They have their narrative in the packet as well. Then we'll open the public hearing and try and ask comments be around 3 minutes or so, depending on interest. Sometimes we let that flex a bit. Then we'll go back into our discussion and I'll say it once so that I don't have to say it for the rest of the evening. Just a reminder that any discussion, crosstalk after the public hearing has closed that is substantive to your vote, please have a motion on the table as per our bylaws before we go into whether or not or why you would or wouldn't vote. So, okay. With that, our first public hearing is the rezone request from range and grazing to general business for historic commercial property in Thompson Springs under the John Corkery rezone. And Lisa, I assume you'll be given the staff report for this one.
Yep.
Okay,
All right.
yours.
Thank you, Emily. The applicants for this rezone application are John Corkery Ripley and Bridget Ann Adams, and John is on the Zoom with us. The application is for a general rezone request to change the current range and grazing zoning on a 10.99 acre parcel located on 75 West Old Highway 6 and 50 in Thompson Springs to general business, which would allow for mixed commercial uses at the property. The future proposed land uses include the addition of 5 employee housing units, small neighborhood retail, personal services, an artist creator space, an indoor venue space, and a small restaurant area. The subject parcel is located adjacent to the main business intersection in the town of Thompson Springs and was historically used for commercial purposes, including the historic hotel, RV park, and the old Cactus Cabaret. The property currently consists of an existing bed and breakfast with 5 rooms for overnight use, as well as a campground RV park consisting of 10 RV sites. The owner's residence is also on site, and that existing business is the Desert Moon. The rezone request requires no current site plan improvements. Later site improvements in connection to proposed additions of various mixed commercial uses on the property and updates to existing structures will be in accordance with requirements of Article 3, use regulations, Article 5, lot design standards, Article 6, general development standards, and Article 9, administration and procedures of the Grand County LUC. The subject property is located within the future land use designations of range, resource, and recreation, as well as rural center. The proposal is consistent with the intent of the range, resource, and recreation future land use designation in that the future proposed uses would provide recreational and resort type activities. It is also consistent with the rural center land use designation in that general business zoning would allow for a variety of commercial uses that promote local tourism, small business, and local commercial. While not a requirement of a rezone application because of the current availability of limited availability of water resources in the area, the applicant has provided a water analysis for the subject property. The submitted analysis demonstrates an existing water account which supports current and future proposed uses based on state regulation guidelines for peak water usage for each existing and proposed use. Development of future proposed uses at the subject property have been discussed with the applicant and will be evaluated in full detail against the Land Use Code and International Business Code at site plan review and building permit review. The proposed rezone is in conformance with Land Use Code Article 9, Administration and Procedure. And just to summarize a couple of the items in the issues for consideration. The zoning request for general business does not appear to be spot zoning as the subject property is adjacent to light industrial. That's the purple here, and highway commercial, which is over here. In terms of the change of character in the area, the Thompson Springs area is undergoing many changes of late, including a replat of the entire town to improve street design and general layout of lots. A land use analysis is slated for the summer of 22 to evaluate zoning for the entire town. Historically, Thompson experienced a boom and a bust and is now on the upswing of that, showing signs of being a viable commercial and residential node, of course, within limitations of water availability, outside of Moab and just off a major interstate. So that's what I have for the staff report. Are there any questions from the commission?
I think maybe this is the time to ask and stop me, Emily. If it isn't, I wanted to ask about water and the letter from the Thompson Springs Special Services Division for water. Because is this the right time or later?
Let's hold that unless there's any just like clarifications in the staff report. Let's hear from the applicant and open our hearing, and then OB, I'll give you sort of first comment after we get to that point. In the conversation.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so our applicant is here. So if you'd like to come off of mute, you're welcome to make a statement or add any additional comments to your narrative. There's no requirement that you do so, but feel free to address the commission if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for having me today. Like Lisa said, this is John, and you know, we bought the desert. Bridget and I bought the Desert Moon about 1.5 years ago, and we've brought a lot of youthful energy to the town and really revitalized the entire property and a lot of the structures. And we're just wanting to bring the old dance hall building up to code and turn it into a restaurant type of facility, like Elise was saying, and like a little gift shop, trading post. We want to create a makerspace garage, and when we bought the property, it came with 8 shares of water. So that's basically equivalent to 120,000 gallons a month. And we worked with the Thompson Springs Special Service District Water Board to go through what we're planning to do in our sort of first phase of development, and what those water uses would require. And we're only proposing to do those developments which don't really require a whole lot of water and within our current capacity of what we have. Down the line, if Thompson Springs is able to acquire more water and the Desert Moon is able to purchase more water rights, there's an interest in us wanting to expand the RV park and whatnot. But at this time, we're not really looking to add capacity. We're just looking to update our facilities. And in order to do that, John and Elisa and Jenna said that we needed to rezone to general business from range and graze, which it's really strange that we were ever rezoned to range and graze in the first place, seeing that the building, I mean, the business has been running since the 1940s, and it's always been a commercial property. So we feel that it was maybe done in error, and are hoping to, go to be rezoned to general business here moving forward. And generally, we just really want to bring energy and excitement to Thompson Springs and help it develop. And I think that we're kind of the key piece to getting that going. Ballard RV Park recently did the same thing, and they just became a bigger, larger RV park. But we want to bring those amenities to the town that are really going to help out, like entertainment, an auto shop, a trading post. Bridget does tattooing. She wants to do tattooing here and kind of make it in the restaurant, obviously, and kind of make the Moon business capable of having retreats and weddings and events. And we feel that this will really help to develop Thompson Springs moving forward in the future. So, yeah.
Thank you for your statement. Does anyone have any clarifications for the applicant from their applicant statement in the packet or just now? Okay. Seeing none, It is 5:18 and I will open the public hearing for any comments related to this application for the upzone from range and grazing to general business on the John Corkery rezone in Thompson. Is there anybody in our waiting room or anybody here who would like to make a comment related to this public hearing?
Emily, we have no one in the waiting room.
Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the hearing and continue to discussion. And OB, you're welcome to kick us off with your question about water to staff.
Well, my real question, first, I didn't understand the water, but I did after reading the application. And the real question I have is, at first it was, how can the water district kind of write a letter that they're going to supply water in a rezone, because of course you don't know what's going to happen. But as I'm understanding it, of course, they're going to use these equivalent residential unit rights that they have to 8 ERUs, and that's going to be all they get. And Trish may be able to help me here. Can you say that, I know if GWISA were saying, well, we're going to supply water to this development, it wouldn't actually have a number of units of water, how many gallons they can have. So is all of this kind of nice and legally tied up that this development will get 8 ERUs of water and no more? Or is this more of a handshake deal in kind of informal letters? So is this a kind of a binding thing? This is how much water they'll get, and that the water district could actually say, whoops, you're exceeding it, we can't give you any more. So that's a question I'd like answered kind of legally, or is this kind of binding? If anybody knows.
I don't know that, OB, for a fact. Yeah, I don't know that. I couldn't answer that question. I mean, yeah. And honestly, JR knows quite a bit about water, and he might be able to answer that. So that's a tough question.
Yeah, if I'm allowed to weigh in on this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, when we bought the property, there's 8 ERUs worth of water, and that's what. So every business here in Thompson has a certain amount of water that they're allotted, and the Desert Moon has obtained a will serve letter, but it's not really a will serve letter because we already have the water, right? All that we're doing is we're just saying that we are making a commitment to stay within that amount of water usage, or we will be required to shut down some of the aspects of our business that are taking up more water than we are allotted per month. And that's the commitment that the Desert Moon has made to the Thompson Special Service District. And that was with that kind of will serve letter that showed what we're planning to do in our phase 1 developments and the water calculations used by the state guidelines to show that, we have what we're proposing to do in phase 1 falls within the water capacity that we already have. And we won't go past those developments unless we are able to purchase more water shares from the Special Service District, if and when the Special Service District is able to obtain more water, which there's a couple likely scenarios of that. But anyways, so we're basically just saying yes, and we're not really trying to do the developments that we're doing in phase 1 aren't really requiring more water than we currently have. We're not trying to add capacity to our resort. We already have a restaurant that's we just have an outdoor seating area, and we want to move that into this building that's the historic Cactus Cabaret building. So we want to bring that building up to code and move the restaurant seating into there. Add a small little gift shop where my girlfriend can sell her artwork, couple of the people on the property can sell their artwork. We could sell some t-shirts and stuff for the Desert Moon, stuff like that. And then the garage makerspace, that's not really going to require more water either. So we're not really proposing to do anything that's going to increase our water needs in this phase 1 plan. And we're committed to staying in that. And I don't think that the building department or the planning and zoning will allow us to do anything further besides the phase 1 plans until more water is secured. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
And I'd say, I mean, I did read through the document. It does answer my question, but this is let me ask a quick question. Are you guys are you monitored on how much you use water? Do you have a meter?
Yes, we have 2 meters, and yeah, we're monitored to see how much, and everybody in town is, to see how much water is being used per month, per each resident, per each business. And so, yes, we do have meters. And like I said, we have made the commitment to stick within our limits, or else sacrifice some of our business entities.
And I'm going to guess, and Trish may or may not know this, but I guess well, you probably don't know it, but Thompson Springs Special Services District could say for somebody who's using more water than than their meters read, you could tell them that that's it. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff related to the staff report specifically? I realize
Emily, can I just jump in here?
Go ahead, John.
Just to
Yes.
add something to what John said, because I think he's done a pretty good job of explaining what he currently has. There's a moratorium there too. So that's extended for another 6 months. So there's no new water services that are permitted. So he can only work within the current water system that he has. Obi's asked some really good questions there, but I think those limits will be managed and administered by the special service district and by enforcement.
I'm looking at the zoning map online right now compared to the packet. Is there an OAO on this property already?
Yes, there is. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. The OAO is, I think it's yellow. Yeah, it's the yellow. Exactly. Thanks, Jenna. So the zoning map is a little bit confusing. The one that's in the packet is, it should have had like a legend with it. Sorry about that. But yeah, let's see.
And is that overlay applied to the full parcel or just that one part of the parcel that's currently developed?
It's just that one portion that has the hotel and the RV sites. And so that was given to, they were grandfathered in. This business existed before the OAO ordinance took place. So the OAO district was just applied to that portion of the property where the existing overnight accommodations business was.
Okay.
So
in addition for the fact that our code doesn't currently account for any expansion, if there was any expansion in the future outside, they would need to apply for a broader OAO over the rest of the property or some additional portion of the property.
Exactly. Yeah. So they're not, then John knows that they're not trying to expand the number of overnight rentals in their current operations at all. They're just, that's remaining the same. In the future, they would like to, but that's not something they're pursuing right now.
Cool. Thanks. I just wanted to understand the situation on the ground. All right. Any other questions, clarification specific to staff? If not, or even if there are, I'll entertain a motion. Steve?
You're muted,
Can't hear
Steve.
you. Steve, you're on mute. There it is.
Thank you. Hold on, let me get back to my page here. I move to send a favorable recommendation to the County Commission for the proposal to rezone property located at 75 West Old Highway 6 and 50 in Thompson Springs on Grand County parcel number 0700210105 to the general business zoning district.
Okay, motion on the table by Steve in favor of a positive recommendation. Is there a second? Seconded by Maketa. There's some people coming in fast behind. Steve, the floor is yours to make a comment in justification of your motion, and then Maketa, and then we can have some additional discussion as a body.
Yeah, I really think probably the current zoning really seems to be an issue of like spot zoning or an irregularity. And I think general business, given the proximity to other similar commercial zonings, makes perfect sense. It's, I mean, where you would put general business in a town is right on the main drag there. And so given that, and kind of the assurances that, you know, they can't at this point use additional water. I mean, that's primary concern in Thompson right now. And since we have the assurances that they can't go over that at this point, seems like kind of a no-brainer to me to allow this to go forward.
Maketa, did you have any additional comments?
No, I had similar like sentiments about the water, hearing that they're going to be operating within the parameters and it's a weird zoning situation. And I just think it sounds like some really good diverse business uses also that doesn't really apply to the planning aspect, but I think it's exciting that these different kinds of businesses and community might be happening.
So just to make sure I understand the moratorium, is that capped at that 8 units, or is that capped at current use, even if it's not within that 8 units? How does that work?
No new water connections are allowed. No new water can be added.
So up to that cap, they can continue. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or discussion?
I'd only say I think this is sounds like a good project. To me also, one hesitancy originally was, of course, this land use survey was going to be finished by summer, and we are kind of helping to determine that. The other thing is I kind of like so far the scenario C in the ones that we're going to talk about tomorrow, which is, of course, this is the start of something like that, but it seems to be the right location too.
Emily, do you mind if I make a comment?
Go ahead.
I know JR quite well. I'm quite impressed by his dedication to that community. I do think they bring this youth to that community, which is really invigorating. It is right in the commercial zone. It is odd that it's currently zoned range and grazing. And so I really support, it's just great to have that vibrancy. And I do think eventually that is where, you know, people are going to live to be able, you know, affordable housing. I think it is going to be Thompson. So.
Tony or Rick, did either of you want to weigh in? No pressure, but if not, go ahead and. Okay, with that, I'll call the question. We have a motion on the table by Steve, seconded by Maketa, to send a favorable recommendation. Let me find the exact page in the packet so I read it. Exact, apologies, digital packets. Okay. We have a motion on the table by Steve to send a favorable recommendation to the County Commission for the proposal to rezone property located at 75 West Old Highway 6 and 50 in Thompson Springs and Grand County parcel number 0700210105 to the general business zoning district. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Any opposed? That is 6 in favor and 1 absent. Thank you very much. All right. With that, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is another public hearing. Same rules apply as before. This is for the Tin Roof OAO application campground RV rezone request for parcel number 0400250059 in the LaSalle Mountain area.
Okay, thank you, Emily. The OAO campground district application is for the purpose of developing a seasonal remote 12 cabin resort in the LaSalle Mountain area that will support one full-time employee and one part-time employee. The applicant is Jick Taylor, and the applicant's representative is Tim Keogh, and they are both present here this evening. Jick is the owner of the 373 acres of property zoned range and grazing. The property has historically consisted of wilderness and vast ranch lands. The project includes a 1,000-foot access road through the development that ends at an emergency turnaround at the north end of the property. Each of the 12 cabins would be accessed via a 20-foot wide approach driveway coming from the left and right of the access road. An engineered septic system will be designed to collect wastewater from each cabin and deliver the wastewater to a leach field at the north end of the property. Potable water will be hauled and stored in a cistern to be delivered via buried pipe to each cabin. The proposed OAO campground district for a 12 cabin seasonal resort is consistent with the 2012 general plan as it fits within the future land use described as range, resource, and recreation, being a recreation resort development. The proposed development is in conformance with LUC Article 9 Administration Procedure. And the proposed development complies with LUC Article 4.6.1 purpose in the following ways. While the property has not historically been used for recreation and camping, the proposed development is likely compatible with the adjacent land uses due to its remote and secluded nature. The site, however, is not directly accessed by an arterial or collector street. It should be noted, though, that the scale of the campground, being only 12 cabins, may not warrant the need for direct access in the same way that a large RV park or hotel would. The applicant conducted an unofficial traffic study and determined that each cabin at full capacity would generate approximately 4 trips per day. The Tin Roof Resort offsets its impact on infrastructure by being an energy efficient and resource efficient project. The concept plan includes the property owner as one of the 2 employees, and the property owner intends to accommodate the housing needs of himself and the additional employee at his branch headquarters located at Hidden Lake, thus demonstrating the provision of employee housing. While the proposed development does offer creative design, it does not propose mixed uses on site or elsewhere in the community. The Tin Roof Cabin Resort development is substantially consistent with LUC Article 4.6.5 design standards. And I'll just highlight a couple of those items. The development proposes a grid-tied solar array to offset the power draw from the grid. Potable water will be hauled and stored in a cistern and delivered via buried pipe to each of the cabins. The applicant hopes to develop on-site potable water in the future. The Tin Roof Resort Master Plan illustrates a relatively small development footprint of 17.44 acres out of 373 acres on the parcel. So majority of the land will be undisturbed, undeveloped. As far as considerations for approval, denial, or postponement, the impact of the proposed development on Grand County's effort to achieve or maintain a balanced ratio of mixed uses in the county, including residential, lodging, and commercial uses. Grand County's present day conditions produce a development ratio of 1.7 overnight accommodation units to 1 primary residential unit, 3 points above the early 2019 ratio of 1.4, which is considered to be the baseline for approving new OAO districts. According to the County Treasurer's database in October of 2021, there are currently 3,372 primary dwelling units in Grand County and 5,414 overnight rental units. There currently does not exist data demonstrating carrying capacity analysis, nor are there additional studies specific to Grand County in relation to considering OAO district approval. In terms of impacts and benefits, I'll just briefly highlight a couple of those items that haven't been stated already. As far as economic diversification, the Tin Roof Resort promotes small-scale remote recreation, and while it may not necessarily enhance economic diversification within Grand County, it does provide a lighter alternative to typical overnight accommodations such as hotels, RV parks, and short-term rentals in residential zones. The development will not have a large impact on job creation, but will provide 1 or 2 employment opportunities. The development is not expected to affect wages in Grand County. And let's see. Public services such as law enforcement and emergency medical services. The minimal runoff created from the roof structures is to be captured via gutters into rain barrels and used for fire protection if needed. So I'm assuming there'll be water storage on site for fire protection. The 70-foot turnaround at the end of the access driveway will allow for emergency vehicles to maneuver onto and off the property. Emergency services will be impacted due to the site's remote location and relative distance from the nearest emergency dispatch. We've already talked about the housing. In terms of crowding, congestion in national parks and nearby public lands, the Tin Roof development is intended to provide for visitors who desire to spend time primarily in the LaSalle Mountain region, as opposed to crowded national parks and other areas of Grand County. The target patrons are thought to be visitors that want to avoid the congestion of Moab and the parks. This development will provide visitors a place to spend time in the quiet mountains of the LaSalles, while also giving them easy access to tens of thousands of acres of public lands for recreation. And that's all I have for the staff report. Are there any questions?
I'm sorry, I'm going to take just half a second to address a comment in the chat. There's someone who's on the call and trying to hear us. There is a phone-in number at the top of the packet, and I've asked the planning staff to put that phone number in the chat as well. It looks like the person dropped. So if they call in after this hearing, we'll give them an opportunity to speak. So sorry to interrupt you, Elisa. Are there any questions related specifically to clarifications in the staff report? Okay, our applicant is here this evening, so we will invite you to come off of mute and optionally make a brief statement if you would like related to your application.
Hi, my name's Tim Keogh. I'm JIC's representative, and to my left is Taylor Hall, the project engineer. Mr. Taylor is also with us. He's a little shy. He's off camera. Thank you for your time tonight. There's really not much to add that Elisa hasn't already put on the table. We do want to stress, though, that it is an opportunity to relieve some of the masses that come to town, at least get a few of them off the streets of Moab, which have been bringing a lot of bad publicity in. This gets people on the backside of the mountain. I'm guessing that a good portion of them won't even be in Moab. JIC hopes to draw from western Colorado and directly off of I-70. Other than that, I think everything's been touched on. We're certainly available for questions should you have any.
All right, thank you. Did somebody want to ask a question of the applicant to clarify their statement in the packet or live? Okay, well, thank you. So it is 5:43 and we will open our public hearing. I do not see anyone on the call, but let's just make sure that there's nobody trying to join. We'll give it just a couple of seconds. And I assume, Jenna, there's nobody in the wait room that we're waiting on?
I see no one waiting now.
Okay, okay.
And Emily, I actually did have a question for the applicant. And what happened was somehow I screwed up.
Go ahead
and
and
couldn't
ask a
get to
question
anything.
while we're letting people pop in.
Here's the question. Where this 17 acres is located, is it adjacent to any federal land? Or is it have a reasonable distance away from federal land?
It's miles from federal land, I do believe. It's completely surrounded by his ranch lands and a few other private ranch lands. Sitla lands, is it forest boundary on the north? Yes. The forest boundary. So yes, federal lands are probably half a mile distant.
The reason for asking the question is the kind of wooey question, the wilderness urban interface, and whether this would require thinning of trees and stuff on federal land, but sounds like you're in good shape there. Thank you very much.
Tony, did you want to ask a question as well?
I was just going to explain, I was looking at the plat map and the land ownership layer, and the rezone is centered in a 300-acre parcel of private land downslope from very large acres of federal land, and I would not characterize it as miles away from federal land. That's a stretch, I think, but you can see that northern boundary on the screen being shared right there.
Yes, that's accurate.
Right, thank you. So seeing nobody here to comment and no comments in the chat, I will close our public hearing. And at this point, if there are any additional clarification questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion on the table. Moby.
I got to go look for my packet here. Unless somebody else is there, maybe Tony's there.
It's like page 115 in the
I don't
digital
know.
packet.
Maybe I missed this, but Elisa, did we mention the written comment we got in today?
There is one written comment that came in time to include it in the agenda packet, and that is in your packet. It's at the very end, I think.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and that was not in favor. We also had one other public comment that came in earlier today, and I forwarded that to the commissioners. So I think some of you maybe did see that, but it was also not in favor.
I'd make the motion, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Anyone else?
Somebody might make.
Motion to vote against your own motion, OB. Do you just
Yep.
want to get it on the table? Rick. All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll read it off of here. So I move to send a favorable recommendation to approve the overnight accommodations overlay as campground rezone and associated master plan for Grand County parcel number 04-0025-0059 located in the LaSalle Mountain area.
All right. Is there a second? No second on the motion. We do need to have a motion on the table for discussion. So if there's not a second, remember, you don't have to vote in favor of your own motion. Then we'll take a option for an alternative motion. Tony. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah.
Tony, can you hear me? Oh, you're
Sorry about that. I'll second the motion made by Rick in favor of discussion.
Okay. So Rick, the table is yours to make any comments about your motion and justification.
It's a long way from any place else. It's very similar to me as to the one we approved out in Westwater. It doesn't have a fancy astronomy thing attached to it or anything like that. But as far as the ratio on basically rentals to residences, I don't think that applies out here. It's a long ways from any place. I doubt that less than 0.5% or or less than that of anybody that lives in Grand County will ever see this place. So to me, it's not covered by a lot of the concerns that we have for what's happening in Moab and Spanish Valley and the rest of Grand County. So it looks to me like it's just a private developer trying to make something happen in a place where there's not really a whole lot going on. So, and he's got, utilities and all the other considerations that create impacts to people. That's all internal to what he's got going on up there. So I don't think it affects a whole lot of anything else.
Tony, did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I everything that Rick has said is accurate. This one was a really difficult.
Oh shoot, Tony, you know what? I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Your audio is doing the same thing that Laura's audio was doing. Do you want to try calling in or try video off?
Does that?
No, it's still breaking up.
I'll call in. Hold on.
All right, thank you so much. And while we're waiting for Tony to call in, did anyone else have any comments?
Emily, would you mind if I made a comment?
Go ahead, Trish.
Am I getting on your nerves?
No, not at all.
Sorry. So I want to preface this comment by stating that I know Jick very well. We're really good friends. So I want to state that. So please keep that in mind and take my comments as you will with those ideas. I agree with what Rick has had to say. I kind of want to go back to this idea that the reason I oppose some of these other developments is they're not locals. We have individuals coming in to make a dollar and walk away. And Jick is a local. He was born and raised here. His family is multi-generational. And this is a way for Jick to make a living. His family were cattlemen and horsemen, and they are no longer in that industry. And so this is a way for him to make a living for himself and to provide for his family. And so that is kind of my take on it. I do believe, it's seasonal. It's not going to have a lot of impact. It's really close to Gateway. So my kind of guess is that a lot of the individuals that will come to that resort will be coming from Colorado. And so I don't see it impacting the valley a lot. And, I'm not a big supporter of overnight accommodations, but I do think this falls out of kind of the norm, but that's just my input.
Okay, and Tony has rejoined us. Can you hear us on your phone, Tony?
Yep, just had to unmute myself again. How do you guys hear me now? Better?
That is much better. Thank you.
Super. Trish, I had to mute my computer to stop the feedback. Were you finished with your comment?
Yes, I'm finished. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Trish. I agree with everything that Rick and Trish have stated so far. I have, just based on principle, a whole lot of heartburn telling a man who's lived in the same place for 5 generations that he can't do something small and simple with a piece of property that's been around in the same hands twice as long as any of us have been alive. That being said, I do have a couple concerns related specifically to the additional volume of traffic that we expect to see. 4 trips up and down that road per day per cabin is booming. An additional 48 trips per day is a significant amount of traffic when you're thinking about the Forest Service roads that exist in that area. And I'm aware of, as of late, the Forest Service's predilection to blast, pave, and expand roads when they begin to have maintenance issues. So I wonder what indirect kind of fallout we can see from additional development on that end of the mountain. I've been elk hunting up there for about 10 years, and I've seen, as more traffic increases, that roads have been deteriorating quite a bit. So that's just a concern, as well as the wildfire risk. that there is National Forest Service land uphill, upslope. There are aspen glades, which generally benefit from wildfire, except when it burns too hot. And I have concern about that. So I'm just recommending to the project proponents that they reach out to whatever resources they may have available, or whatever assistance they may be able to get from the government to make defensible space. And like OB's concerns about the WUI, that needs to be comfortable with it just being a comment now, but that really should be a paramount concern in this kind of development. I assume such a rustic type cabin is going to have a wood-fired stove. I mean, I don't imagine you're running electric baseboard heat in those guys. So that's basically all I had to say. I don't have the stomach to tell a person that he can't do this development, but just some things I'd like to know that the project proponents have thought about is all.
John, since we're considering a master plan as part of this recommendation, what is our ability to attach conditions as amendments onto this motion with regard to, let's see, things that have been raised by Tony are specific to the design of the cabins themselves, as well as any WUI considerations?
Well, the WUI code is not currently up to date completely, but the defensible space regulations are there. Just they're not current. So that what we would consider the 10 meter in Canada, which is a 30 meter distance, which is the first part of that, is the most effective way of managing WUI or wildfire, amongst other things. Of course, the construction of the building, the roof, the siding, all of those can be regulated. So that's part of the permitting process. The other question that Tony raises is about traffic. I'm not sure the road, he knows that much better than I do, of course. But it's obviously, I think it's very light traffic considering, I don't know if it's a D road, Tony, is that what it is? Or is it a forestry road?
Not sure.
Yeah.
I might speak to this just a touch. This is Jenna here. We did have this application in front of the DRT on the 9th just to kind of collect a few additional comments. And I'll just read here what our roads department had to say. While Bill wasn't in attendance, he provided this comment. This property can be accessed by County Road number 87, aka Newells and or Tin Roof Road. The road surface is designated as gravel, but is thin in many areas of its 0.06 miles. The county does not perform winter maintenance on this road at this time, and if the developer proposes any upgrades to the road or additional maintenance, the initial cost should be on the developer to bring the road to, an agreed upon standard. Additionally, also the county may want to consider having the road right-of-way dedicated to the county. That's what he provided.
So it sounds like there's some potential optional amendments there. One, and again, I want to make sure that we're in our means to stipulate this at the master planning process and not later on, but a stipulation that the developer would be responsible for any upgrades that they wanted to see as a part of this project. I don't think we could stipulate that the road was deeded to the county, but I'd love some clarification there. And could we add an amendment that requires the developer to update the property to, the most current standards within a 5-year period, even if the standards are updated after the permit is released or something to that end? Like what is flexibility here to ensure future compliance and safety for the community?
I think, Emily, if you're stretching at WUI, I think that'd be a bit of a stretch for planning commission to do that. That's really up to the permitting process. As far as the road is concerned, that can be part of a servicing agreement. And I don't know if Tim Keogh has thought of what that would look like, and dedication that can always be attached to the servicing agreement. And Elisa might want to weigh in here too, or Jenna.
Oh, I was just looking in our code for something regarding defensible space, just to go back to that. And I don't know if you guys can see my screen with the code section here. So basically when they come back after this, if this was approved for the OAO district, they would then come with their site plan application. And at that point, we would require, this section of the code to be applied to their development, which it does give some direction that I think would be beneficial. So it's already built in our code to some degree, but I don't know if it's up to the standard that y'all are talking about.
So just to throw my 2 cents in on this, looking at the defensible space zoning code here, and from what I've heard from some other builders, this is probably, I would say this would not be adequate up in the LaSalle's based on, this is more like lowland kind of desert. It says above. I was just looking at the Colorado defensible space standards, and there seems to be far more bolstered out than this and a little more conservative, just from what I know of it. So I'm just throwing that out there. That's what I got.
I mean,
Steve,
if I could just jump in here, Tony, sorry. To your point, if you look at the research around defensible space, there is a 10 meter, it says 30 feet. If you just scroll down a little bit, it says 30 feet around the main area. That in the research, it doesn't matter how intense the fires are. That covers about 60 or 70% of intense fires around buildings. Now, it depends how the building's built. It depends what's stored on site. It depends whether there's any other fencing that's there. There's a lot of other conditions attached. But it's got zone 1 shall consist of 30-foot area immediately adjacent surrounding structures. That's the standard. That's the industry standard for the first area of protection. And that applies across the states. The second zone is different. That's a bigger area, and you might be hitting on a good point. You might be hitting a bunch of good points there, Steve. I'm not trying to say that there isn't different types of wildfires, but that standard defensible space is pretty standard in the States.
Tony, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting funny feedback on my phone. I apologize.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
That's better. Sorry. I think I'm glad to see that defensible space is a part of the land use code. I likely should have been aware of that before I brought up my previous comment. As a matter of philosophy, I don't think it's necessarily appropriate that we hold the tailors on the hook for what our land use code says and whether or not our rules are adequate. We do have provisions here regarding defensible space and standards in that site plan and design. They will be held to that. And so my concerns here are addressed in so much as there is a standard that they'll have to follow. Whether or not that standard is adequate or needs update, I think is a conversation separate and outside of what we are considering right now.
So I might suggest it. Well, I'll offer an alternative way of looking at that's where I'm at on this one. At a high level, I actually think that this is a great, idea for use of land in a more rural area of the county. I'm in favor of development by locals, especially development that doesn't create direct impact on the other issues that we're facing currently closer to the city centers. We are currently going through a general planning process, and this is an area of the county that we have not paid close attention to. We are looking at our land use code as a part of that general plan, which gives us the opportunity to say, in different areas of the county, do our standards need to be heightened in order to account for the unique circumstances on the ground? Because on the backside of the LaSalle's, we have a very different situation than we do on the front side and closer to town. I'm also concerned about the fact that the situation up in the LaSalle Mountains has changed significantly since our land use code was most recently significantly updated. And we saw that effect this summer. And a single spark wildfire can have drastic effects on our mountains and our aquifers and our way of life here across the entire community for all locals of all types. And I think the last thing I'll say is that the county has expressed interest to look at assured housing with regards to campgrounds and not just hotels and motels and B&Bs. And I realize that we have potentially started the risk of the slippery slope of adopting some of these smaller OAO projects, knowing that the county is open to revisiting assured housing standards related to campgrounds. I personally would like to see the county move forward on these general planning, land use code updates, considering the climate impact specific under those, and also considering assured housing for additional OAO, no matter how big or small the project is, before I were to send a favorable recommendation. I'm not personally against this project in of itself at a 50,000 foot view, but given everything else that's going on, the timing and the unique considerations of the lack of historic focus on this part of the county, I'm personally not in favor of sending a favorable recommendation forward at this time, but I don't say that with any prejudice to the project itself. So I do think that we should consider the fact that as a legislative decision, the county has the ability to make a decision on whether or not this project is the appropriate development at the appropriate time for the appropriate place, without signaling prejudice about the merits of the applicant or the potential future viability of this type of development if certain standards were changed. So that is an important difference between these administrative and legislative decisions. So that's the sum of my comments.
I have a quick question for staff, and it's in reference to one of your points, Emma, that you bring up about like the assured housing or staff housing for campgrounds in the development agreement. So to staff in the development agreement, is there anything that would ensure that the developers, the owners there had to make sure that this, I think, like half-time and full-time employee, I guess the owner is the full-time person, but are they beholden to staff housing via the development agreement? I was just glancing at it, I don't see anything.
No, that's kind of been the need. We need to update our assured housing section because right now assured housing exempts campgrounds, so we can't require employee housing for campgrounds at this point, but we're working on changing that. So yeah, the development agreement is not going to have that in there, and we can't put it in there legally. It's just, it would be that quid pro quo thing that we keep coming up against. So.
And Steve, nope, I'm not muted. You make an interesting point there, sort of indirectly. As we've looked at other proposals that have come before us, not for OAO, but for other types of developments, one of the things that we've raised in our recommendations is that there are tools that the county has at its disposal to require employee housing as part of developments of various types. And in this case, we have said that, we don't think that in the past campgrounds have not been included, but since there's openness to consider that, this is another place where, given that we can't require any deed restriction as part of a quid pro quo, I would recommend to the county commission that they consider revising our assured housing to look at campgrounds specifically, and then revisit this type of application with that in mind, so that they have the tools at their disposal to support both the local developer and the local residents that would live and work there and see their housing values affected by this type of development. So I don't mean to have the last word on that. If there's any other comments or discussion, feel free to raise them. And if not, we will go ahead and call the question. No more discussion? Okay, with that, I will call the question on the motion made by Rick. And I'm sorry, I didn't note it down. Who seconded that? Was that Steve who seconded that? No. Was it Tony?
It was Tony.
That was Tony.
Sorry, I got myself backwards. So there is a motion on the table to send a favorable recommendation to approve the overnight accommodations overlay campground zone and associated master plan for Grand County parcel number 0400250059 located in the LaSalle Mountain area. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that's 2 in favor. All opposed? And that is, oh, Rick, I'm sorry, were you in favor or opposed? I saw your hand up for in favor. In favor. So Steve and Rick in favor. Tony, Makeda, and myself. Obi, have you voted yet?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, so we have 2 opposed, or excuse me, 2 in favor, 3 opposed, 1 abstention. We do need to have, this is confusing, not a positive or negative recommendation, but we need to have a majority recommendation on the table. So we will need to consider an alternative motion to send an unfavorable recommendation. So I'll go ahead and put that on the table. So I move to send an unfavorable recommendation to, and sorry, just to clarify for the applicant's sake and anyone listening, as a recommending body, the Planning Commission does need to send a recommendation forward one way or another, or if it ends up scratched 3-3, then we can send that forward. And that's why I'm putting this alternative motion on the table. So just to clarify. So I move to send an unfavorable recommendation to improve the overnight accommodations overlay campground rezone and associated master plan for Grant County parcel number 0400250059, located in the LaSalle Mountain area without prejudice. I'm going to add a little bit of language to this, with a recommendation that the county commission specifically look at this area of the county in our general planning and land use code updates process before considering similar applications in this area. Is there a second for my alternative motion? Seconded by Makeda. Any additional discussion? Tony, it looks like you wanted to say something.
That was the second, sorry.
That was a second. All right. So with that.
That is just the faster gun.
Steve, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to throw a few things out there, because this is, I would say for me, this is a difficult one. And I would say ultimately why I voted the way I did, and why I'm leaning towards being more in favor of this. We've got so much of this county can't be developed. And so the times that somebody is willing to develop something that is in the private sphere, I think we should really, or for me personally, I put a lot of weight into that. And I think, and now it's not to say that I think, well, if it's private land, we should develop it no matter what, because we have a scarcity of private land out there, but it's something I take into consideration. And what I've noticed is we so often are searching for the perfect scenario that we overlook good or even good enough. And while we would love to have some elements in our code about, well, do we have the guarantees of employee housing? Absolutely, we need to pursue that. In this case, it's 1.5 people. I don't think it contributes ultimately to the, being a negative thing if this is postponed to where, if it were to go ahead and, all of a sudden they can't house their employees. 1.5 people, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Meanwhile, it seems like the owner is going to be staying there on property, gives somebody who has land that they're paying taxes on an avenue to afford it and make a living. I think that's something else we need to think about, is every time we defer, these are people's lives that are, we're kind of upending a little bit too in certain situations. When does the land use code actually get updated to reflect a change that we would want to see? Is that 2 months? Is that 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? And meanwhile, property owners they're paying expenses, on that land that's sitting there. And so I think that's an element that goes into this as well. I apologize for my last point. Words are kind of eluding me right now at 6 p.m. on Monday. The other point I want to make is, we're worried about fires up there, and potentially this is a way to, I don't know, people would be camping up there. Now they've got a controlled space in a fire pit with staff on duty to make sure that there's no, rager out there. Ultimately, I don't know if the folks in those cabins would be out there, having a fire kind of without professionals kind of on duty, so to speak, to intervene if things are out of hand, but it's an element of it. So I just wanted to make those points and hope that was coherent enough there. I got a little off at some certain points, but yeah, that's my perspective on it. So just kind of throwing that in for a little balance.
McKenna?
Respectfully, Steve, there is a lot of private property on that side of the mountain, quite a bit actually, as compared to the rest of the LaSalles. And so I think this is a precedent that we'd be setting, and we're on the brink of a new general plan. So I don't think this is a matter of like, you're saying the private property on the mountains and it being far and few between, but there is quite a bit of private property. And so just taking that into consideration is not a light decision, since there is so much private property and we are on the brink of a general plan.
Yeah,
I appreciate that, McKenna. And just maybe to clarify my point, I was just speaking countywide when we look at the amount of land that's private and has the ability to be developed versus public. So not specifically in that one nucleus, just countywide.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our previous commissioner Garish would ask the question, is his interview question to any applicants to the Planning Commission: how do you balance the rights of private developers, private landowners, and the public good? Because that is a very challenging balance to find. So just a couple comments in response to your comments, Steve. Not one-on-one, but just, I think it's useful to talk through this. So as far as the rights of individuals to develop their lands, I fully agree with that. I think that, given the considerations that I've raised, if they were accounted for, once the county has had a chance to look at them more holistically, I actually think this is, a great project on the merits. I mean, it's sustainable components, the fact that it's developed to be intentionally small, within a larger parcel. They're not looking for an overlay across the entire parcel of land, just the smaller area. I actually think that there's a lot to be said that's very positive about this application. So saying that we should use our legislative authority as a county to assess development in particularly undeveloped parts of the county with some degree of scrutiny, I don't think is the same thing as suggesting that this individual development or even developments of this type or in this area are bad or wrong or shouldn't happen. So just want to say, for clarity, that's where I'm holding the balance between the two. It's true. It's very difficult to ask individual developers to come with the perfect application. And there are, existing documents in place for a reason. The reason that we have the legislative authority with regards to these types of developments is you only get one shot with each individual parcel, especially when it comes to upzoning, to make sure that it represents the direction that the county and its citizens want to take our general lands and consider the risk. And I think, while this applicant and landowner might want to be there to stifle any fire before it happens, or be extra vigilant, if they sold the land, you might not have that, which they could do. And so we're looking at this at a parcel level with regard to planning in the area and countywide, not based off of one individual applicant. And so applicants could be great applicants and have great ideas, but we have to look this at a land planning level. And that's why I think we need a little extra scrutiny. The fire that started this past year, started in a fairly much more developed area than this particular development would be. There were people at home when the fire started in the Pack Creek area, and it ripped out and burned 9,000 acres. So just having people around isn't enough to say that it doesn't represent a risk. And I think that that's something we should concern ourselves with. And I think in looking at the land use code, we should look at the standards in Colorado, which is, relatively close proximity to this development, and say, do we need to have heightened standards in our forested areas of the county? And again, having the legislative option to update that is because we want to protect both the now and the future. So I think you raise good points. It's just, given the fact that we are in the process of actively reviewing our land use code and actively reviewing our general plan, I don't see this as a overwhelming burden. And I think it benefits the county and its residents, both current and future, to just be diligent before we start to open up, this type of development in areas we haven't looked before. So that's kind of the thinking in my head. Sorry for the lecture from my part, but I just wanted to sort of give a little bit of my thoughts to that. Are there any other comments, discussion? I know this is sensitive, and I appreciate the fact that people who stand, in favor of this recommendation or against this recommendation are all being incredibly thoughtful about this particular application. So with that, I'll call the question. There is a alternative motion on the table made by me to send an unfavorable recommendation to approve the overnight accommodations overlay campground rezone and associated master plan to the parcel in the packet without prejudice until the county has an opportunity to revisit the land use code, the general plan, as it relates to parcels in this area. So all in favor of the motion to send an unfavorable recommendation forward, raise your hand. That's 4. All opposed? Okay, and no abstentions. So that does pass. And to our applicants, thank you for being here this evening. And I appreciate your patience as we go through this discussion, and wish you luck before the County Commission as you bring it forward to them. Okay, that ends our public hearings for the evening. We have a few items under future considerations. So Elisa or John, I don't know which of you is taking this. The status of the HDHO expansion, which just for some context, that letter, and thank you for your comments, we did send forward to staff, but I believe due to some of the things we'll hear about in just a moment, there's a delay on that. Is that kind of Lisa or John?
I think John might have more information on, I think that the letter did get passed on to the commissioners, and there was some discussion, but ultimately, because of the unresolved litigation around the HDHO, we can't look at the possibility of expanding or anything like that until that is resolved. And it's very likely that that will happen within the next, or we're hoping. We do have a new submittal, a revised submittal from the applicant that was going to address things in the litigation and resolve, but we haven't been able to come to a final agreement. So
yeah, if I could just add to what Lisa said, I think the commission did look at the letter, but we are still waiting for the litigation to be settled on Viewgate, right, Elisa?
Peakview.
Peakview. It's those views get me mixed up. Peakview is still in litigation, so hopefully that'll be settled. We hopefully it was 2 months ago, but still hasn't been settled. We do have an evaluation that Elisa's put together around the HDHO kind of snapshot that's there. I think we mentioned this to the commission before, and moving forward with a number of options, which we want to vet with Christina first as well, and internally. So we're ready for that anytime once the litigation settled.
Wonderful. Okay. John, I'll let you just kind of guide us through these future considerations that you have in the packet to the extent you need any discussion, or if it's just an update.
Okay, if I can grab the right document here. So on March the 3rd, here's our proposal, and I'd like to get the Planning Commission's comment. We've oriented this somewhat like the last one at Grand Center. As I mentioned, it'll be outside the Star Center. We're just working through the logistics right now. We want to get the city involved. It'd be great to have San Juan County. They're going to be invited as well. So there's 5 tables. The first one is obviously central, the land use one, and it's coordinating that with our consultant, who will have a tabletop exercise for people that are there. Public lands, we're hoping that we'll have there again some engagement with them and the city on their initiatives, and hopefully San Juan County. So we'd like to bring them into the fold there too. We don't want to water this down so much. Elisa keeps saying, quit putting so many tables in there. So I tried to manage this because I keep thinking we should do this. We should do this one. Okay, so we've got the Grand Water and Sewer, or I should say the Infrastructure Water Sewer Consortium that's working together with multi-jurisdictional, which is great. So Chuck Williams of the city is willing to participate in this, and so is Dana. Housing, obviously, the shared housing question, affordable housing, that's being redone right now. So Lisa's going to coordinate that group. And Economic Development Master Plan, which is next one on the list. I'll talk about both of those right now. And that one, we're hoping that August and Ben, because that RFP is just beginning, and we're hoping that we'll have Planning Commission representatives on the steering committee for the Economic Development Master Plan too. So, and then the Transportation Master Plan, the TAC meeting, Technical Advisory Committee meeting is this Thursday. I think, Emily, you're on that, aren't you? Yeah, okay, that's this Thursday. So that'll be an important exercise to go through. We kicked that around a number of times today and take a look at the projects that are there and ranking them, which is not easy, of course. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do. And I wouldn't mind either now or later if anyone has any comments about this setup. We're hoping it'll all be outside. The weather will be perfect, right around 55, 60, somewhere around there.
John, I have a question. You said, when you said Star Courts, my thought was it would be the basketball courts by Star Hall, but you just said the Trans Center, and I realized I don't know where the Star Court is. So
that's where it is. It is. Yeah, it's the basketball court.
Okay.
I don't know. Is that why it's called Star Court? Because there's basketball there?
I had no idea. I assumed so, but it was first to me.
I've never heard that term, that place in my life.
Well, that's what they've been calling it. I didn't call it. I didn't make it up.
It's Sun Court.
Sun Court?
It's called Sun Court.
Sun Court, to be honest.
I've always heard it called Sun Court, but then when we went to go reserve it at the city, they were calling it the Star Court.
So just
yeah, Sun Court, Moon Court. They must have just messed it up. That's funny.
The ball court's on Center next to Star Hall. Yes,
yeah,
right.
That's what it is. And we'll have a backup for Star Hall, which is not a great place for public meetings because there's not a lot of space there. But that's our backup in case something happens with the weather. We're hoping to roll down a flat screen from the county offices, so we'll have a good venue there for that too. So anyway, that's the goal, is to get the really launch here is really the land use planning, scenario planning, and reporting back after the workshop tomorrow, and any feedback from the steering committee next week. And that's all I have.
And in terms of the reason we put the economic development master plan on future considerations is just to say that we are connecting with August and Ben this week. We have a meeting set up with them to kind of start collaborating and having a discussion on the plan for creating that plan. So I know he has some funding for creating a master plan for economic development. So we're just going to start working on that. So I just wanted to put it out there.
All right. Thank you. Any other items for future considerations? Trish, I know I had raised some questions regarding the commission, but I actually think we can table that for future conversations since there's so many things in flux just related to commission priorities, but we'll have time together tomorrow, and then moving forward, we'll look for some further direction after your next meeting. So.
Okay, that sounds great.
Great. All right. Any other comments? Well, it's 6:27, which gets us just to about 2 hours in. So I say we adjourn if there is a motion.
I wanted to say one thing before, which is I really did appreciate everybody's discussion. It's wonderful to see us not all in agreement and talking wonderfully civilly and convincing us in all kinds of ways. So I really appreciate that. And I'd like to motion that we adjourn the meeting.
All right. Well, before I announce the second from Steve, I will say thank you as well, because I do. It is difficult. It is hard to serve in these bodies. We haven't had a lot of sort of controversial items come up in recent history, and I just want to thank everyone for the candor and the openness. And now, Steve, was that you seconding the motion?
I was just going to say I appreciate this. No, I do second the motion, but yeah, no, I should jump in on this appreciation fest. But yeah, I appreciate you all as well for the civil discourse. And
Thank
I
you all.
seconded the motion.
Well, if there's no further discussion or appreciation, I will go ahead and call the vote to adjourn. All in favor?